It is better to do nothing than to do what is wrong. For whatever you do to yourself. Marcus Aurelius. People believe darkness is always action. A sudden strike, a visible wound, a direct lie. They imagine villains twirling mustaches in open daylight, announcing their evil plans to anyone who will listen. This is a childish fantasy. True darkness often arrives cloaked in silence. It bleeds you dry not with grand gestures, but with subtle omissions, the missing word, the unwritten letter, the unspoken truth. This is the art of darkness by omission, a strategy favored by those who understand that what isn't said can be far more potent than what is. We are not concerned with the naive morality tales of right and wrong. We seek to understand the mechanisms of power, the gears that turn beneath the surface of human interaction. Forget the simplistic narratives of heroes and villains. Here, we dissect the shadows, exposing the quiet manipulations that shape our world. It's a world most prefer to ignore, a world where the absence of action becomes the most devastating weapon of all. The masses are easily distracted by spectacle, by the bold and obvious. They are trained to look for the overt threat, the flashing blade. But the true predators operate in the blind spots, in the spaces between words, in the pregnant pauses where doubt and fear take root. They are the masters of silence, the architects of absence, and their power lies in the darkness they create, not through what they do, but through what they deliberately neglect to do. Their victims remain unaware of the trap until it is far too late, ensnared not by chains, but by the invisible threads of what was left unsaid, undone, and ultimately denied. The human mind is wired to fill in gaps, to create narratives even when information is incomplete. This inherent tendency is the key to understanding the effectiveness of darkness by omission. We crave closure, we seek patterns, and we construct our own realities based on fragments of truth. When information is deliberately withheld, the mind rushes to compensate, often conjuring scenarios far more damaging than any explicit declaration could achieve. The manipulator understands this intrinsic need for completion and exploits it mercilessly. They carefully curate the absence of information, knowing that the void they create will be filled with the anxieties and insecurities of their target. The victim becomes their own torturer, crafting elaborate nightmares from the silence, perpetually haunted by the ghosts of what might be. The anxiety produced by the unknown is far more potent than the fear of the known. We can prepare for a tangible threat. We can strategize and defend. But against the shapeless dread born of omission, we are often powerless. Consider the subtle power of the unanswered question. A direct denial can be challenged, refuted, debated, but silence in response to a legitimate inquiry plants a seed of doubt that can fester and grow. The person asking the question is left to grapple with their own interpretations, their own fears, and their own suspicions. They are forced to confront the possibility that the truth is far worse than they imagined, a truth so terrible that it cannot even be spoken. The unspoken becomes a monster, its form shifting and evolving with each passing moment of silence. This technique is particularly effective in intimate relationships where trust and vulnerability are paramount. A partner who consistently avoids direct answers, who deflects difficult conversations, or who simply refuses to acknowledge uncomfortable truths can slowly erode the foundations of the relationship. The other partner is left to question their own sanity, their own judgment, and their own perception of reality. They are trapped in a labyrinth of uncertainty with no clear path to escape. The strategic use of omission extends far beyond personal relationships. It is a favored tactic in the realms of politics, business, and espionage. A politician who avoids addressing a controversial issue can maintain the support of diverse factions, each interpreting their silence in a way that suits their own agenda. A corporation that fails to disclose potential risks can boost its stock price in the short term, even if it ultimately leads to a catastrophic collapse. A spy agency that withholds crucial information from its operatives can create a climate of paranoia and distrust, making them more susceptible to manipulation. In each of these scenarios, the power of omission lies in its ability to control the narrative without ever explicitly stating a falsehood. The truth is not denied. It is simply buried beneath a mountain of silence, accessible only to those who are willing to dig deep enough to uncover it. The effectiveness of darkness by omission is further amplified by the human tendency to avoid conflict. Confronting uncomfortable truths requires courage, resilience, and a willingness to challenge the status quo. Many people would rather remain in a state of blissful ignorance than risk disrupting the fragile equilibrium of their lives. The manipulator preys on this inherent desire for comfort, offering the illusion of stability in exchange for silence. They create an environment where dissent is discouraged, where questions are met with hostility, and where the truth is actively suppressed. Over time, the victims become complicit in their own oppression, afraid to speak out for fear of retribution. The silence becomes a self-perpetuating cycle, reinforcing the power of the manipulator and perpetuating the darkness. The art of omission requires a keen understanding of human psychology, a mastery of social dynamics, and an unwavering commitment to the pursuit of power. It is not a strategy for the faint of heart, but for those who are willing to embrace the shadows and exploit the vulnerabilities of others. To wield this power effectively, one must cultivate an aura of ambiguity, a sense of impenetrable mystery that keeps others guessing. One must learn to speak without saying anything, to promise without committing, and to control without appearing to do so. The goal is not to deceive through outright lies, but to guide perception through carefully crafted silences, nudging others towards desired conclusions without ever revealing one's true intentions. It is a strategy best deployed with precision, for overuse can breed suspicion. The skilled practitioner understands the value of occasional transparency, offering carefully selected truths to maintain credibility and disarm potential adversaries. These calculated disclosures serve as a smokescreen, obscuring the deeper, more consequential omissions that lie beneath the surface. The key is to create a perception of honesty while simultaneously concealing the most critical information. This delicate balancing act requires a level of self-control and strategic thinking that few possess. It is a game of chess played with human emotions, where the ultimate prize is control over the thoughts, feelings, and actions of others. The silent move is often the most devastating. The absence of evidence becomes the evidence itself. The unasked question becomes the damning accusation. And the unspoken truth becomes the weapon of choice for those who seek to dominate in the shadows. Consider the case of Marcus Agrippa, a close confidant and general of Emperor Augustus. Agrippa was instrumental in securing Augustus's rise to power, winning crucial battles and managing vast territories with unparalleled efficiency. His loyalty was unquestionable, his competence undeniable. Yet Augustus, a master of political maneuvering, understood the potential threat that Agrippa posed. Agrippa's popularity with the Roman legions and the populace was significant. His military victories and administrative skills made him a natural successor, a fact that Augustus could not ignore. Openly challenging Agrippa would have been politically disastrous, potentially sparking a civil war and undermining Augustus's carefully constructed image of benevolent rule. Instead, Augustus employed a strategy of subtle omission. He consistently praised Agrippa's achievements publicly, showering him with honors and titles. However, Augustus also ensured that Agrippa never quite received the full recognition he deserved. While celebrating Agrippa's victories, Augustus subtly redirected the narrative, highlighting his own strategic genius and portraying Agrippa as a mere instrument of his will. Augustus carefully cultivated relationships with key senators and influential figures, subtly suggesting that Agrippa, despite his military prowess, lacked the political acumen and refined sensibilities necessary to rule Rome. These suggestions were never direct accusations, but rather carefully crafted whispers, insinuations planted in fertile ground. Augustus also controlled the historical narrative, commissioning works of art and literature that emphasized his own role in securing peace and prosperity for Rome. Agrippa's contributions were acknowledged, but always framed within the context of Augustus's overarching vision. This subtle diminishment of Agrippa's legacy served to undermine his political standing and prevent him from becoming a viable challenger to Augustus's rule. The omissions were carefully calibrated to create a perception that Agrippa, while valuable, was ultimately subservient and lacked the independent authority to govern. Agrippa, aware of Augustus's machinations, remained loyal, perhaps understanding that openly defying the emperor would be futile. He continued to serve Augustus faithfully until his death, never directly challenging his power or revealing the subtle manipulations that had kept him in check. Augustus, through his calculated omissions, successfully neutralized a potential rival without resorting to overt aggression or creating open conflict. He maintained the facade of friendship and gratitude, while quietly ensuring that Agrippa's power remained constrained. This example illustrates the potency of darkness by omission. It is not the lies that inflict the deepest wounds, but the unspoken truths, the carefully concealed realities that shape perception and control outcomes. The absence of certain facts, the subtle shifts in emphasis, and the strategic silences can be far more effective than any direct confrontation. The trap of darkness by omission often ensnares those who prioritize immediate gratification over long-term strategic thinking. A common error lies in underestimating the cumulative effect of these subtle manipulations. Individuals focused on daily tasks and immediate rewards may fail to recognize the gradual erosion of their influence and reputation. They see individual instances of being overlooked or having their contributions minimized as isolated incidents, rather than recognizing them as part of a larger, deliberate pattern. This short-sightedness prevents them from taking proactive steps to counter the strategy, leaving them vulnerable to further manipulation. They fail to understand that power is not merely about holding a position, but also about controlling the narrative surrounding that position. The constant drip of subtle omissions slowly redefines their role and diminishes their perceived value. Another vulnerability stems from a misplaced sense of loyalty or obligation. Individuals may be hesitant to challenge those who employ darkness by omission, particularly if they perceive them as mentors, superiors, or allies. They may fear damaging the relationship or appearing ungrateful, even when they recognize that their contributions are being deliberately downplayed. This reluctance to confront the issue allows the manipulator to continue their strategy unchecked. The victim's silence becomes complicity, reinforcing the false narrative that is being created. Furthermore, many individuals are simply ill-equipped to recognize darkness by omission in the first place. They lack the necessary understanding of power dynamics and psychological manipulation to detect the subtle cues that indicate a deliberate attempt to undermine them. They may attribute the omissions to simple oversight, incompetence, or even their own shortcomings, rather than recognizing them as a calculated strategy. This lack of awareness makes them easy targets, as they are unable to mount a defense against a threat they do not even perceive. The manipulator exploits this naivety, knowing that their actions will likely go unnoticed or misinterpreted. The most dangerous aspect of this trap lies in its insidious nature. It operates beneath the surface, subtly shaping perceptions and undermining trust without ever triggering a direct confrontation. The victim may feel a growing sense of unease or frustration, but they struggle to pinpoint the source of their discomfort. They sense that something is amiss, but they cannot articulate the problem clearly. This ambiguity makes it difficult to rally support or take effective action. They are caught in a web of subtle manipulations, unable to break free because they cannot fully grasp the nature of their predicament. The weak often fall prey to this because they underestimate the power of perception. They believe that their actions speak for themselves and that their contributions will be recognized regardless of how they are framed. They fail to understand that perception is reality and that those who control the narrative ultimately control the power. They neglect the crucial task of managing their own image and ensuring that their accomplishments are properly acknowledged. This passivity allows others to define them, to shape their reputation, and to ultimately control their destiny. The trap is complete when the victim internalizes the diminished perception of themselves that has been created by the manipulator. They begin to doubt their own abilities, to question their own judgment, and to accept the limitations that have been imposed upon them. This self-doubt further reinforces their vulnerability and makes them even less likely to challenge the status quo. They become prisoners of their own minds, trapped by the narrative that has been crafted by their manipulator. The final stage of the trap involves the victim's eventual replacement or marginalization. Once their power has been sufficiently eroded and their reputation sufficiently damaged, they are deemed expendable. They are quietly removed from positions of influence, their contributions forgotten or attributed to others. They become cautionary tales, examples of what happens to those who fail to play the game of power. The manipulator, meanwhile, continues to operate with impunity, their methods remaining hidden beneath a veil of plausible deniability. The cycle of darkness by omission continues, claiming new victims and perpetuating the illusion of fairness and meritocracy. The key to avoiding this trap lies in developing a keen awareness of power dynamics, a willingness to challenge subtle manipulations, and a proactive approach to managing one's own image and reputation. It requires a constant vigilance and a refusal to accept the narratives that are imposed upon us by others. It demands that we speak the unspoken truths and expose the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of everyday interactions. Only then can we break free from the trap of darkness by omission and reclaim our power. The Machiavellian strategy in Darkness by Omission is about controlling the narrative, not through direct lies, but through the careful selection and suppression of information. It's a game of sculpting perception, where the manipulator acts as a puppeteer, subtly guiding the audience's understanding of events and individuals. This is not about blatant falsehoods. It's about strategically withholding key facts, context, or perspectives that would paint a different picture. The manipulator understands that people tend to fill in the gaps in their knowledge with assumptions, biases, and pre-existing beliefs. By controlling the flow of information, they can subtly influence these assumptions and steer the narrative in their desired direction. This approach offers deniability. When challenged, the manipulator can claim they never explicitly lied, merely omitted certain details. This allows them to maintain an air of innocence while still achieving their desired outcome. The execution of this strategy requires a deep understanding of human psychology. The manipulator must be adept at identifying vulnerabilities, predicting reactions, and exploiting cognitive biases. They need to understand what information people are likely to accept, what they are likely to reject, and how they will interpret ambiguous or incomplete data. This is not merely about withholding negative information about oneself. It's about selectively highlighting positive aspects while downplaying or ignoring any contradictory evidence. It's also about selectively exposing negative aspects of rivals while downplaying or ignoring their positive attributes. This careful manipulation of the information landscape creates a distorted reality where the manipulator appears virtuous and their rivals appear flawed. The art of darkness by omission also involves creating an atmosphere of uncertainty and doubt. By subtly undermining trust and confidence, the manipulator can make people more susceptible to their influence. This can be achieved through the spreading of rumors, the dissemination of half-truths, or the planting of seeds of suspicion. The goal is to create a climate where people are unsure of what to believe, and therefore more likely to defer to the manipulator's judgment. This uncertainty can also be used to paralyze opponents, making them hesitant to act for fear of making a mistake or being misled. By controlling the information environment, the manipulator can effectively control the actions of others. Another key element of the Machiavellian strategy is the use of intermediaries. The manipulator rarely acts directly, preferring to use others to disseminate their carefully crafted narrative. This provides an extra layer of deniability and makes it more difficult to trace the manipulation back to its source. These intermediaries may be unwitting accomplices who genuinely believe they are acting in the best interests of others, or they may be willing participants who are motivated by personal gain or a desire for power. Regardless of their motivations, these intermediaries serve as conduits for the manipulator's message, amplifying its reach and influence. The strategic use of silence is also crucial. Sometimes the most effective way to manipulate a situation is to say nothing at all. By remaining silent, the manipulator can create a vacuum that is filled with speculation and conjecture. This allows them to control the narrative without having to actively participate in it. Silence can also be used to intimidate opponents, making them feel isolated and vulnerable. By refusing to acknowledge their existence or their arguments, the manipulator can effectively silence them and render them powerless. The long-term success of this strategy depends on the manipulator's ability to maintain control of the information environment. This requires constant vigilance and a willingness to adapt to changing circumstances. The manipulator must be prepared to counter any attempts to challenge their narrative and to suppress any information that threatens to expose their methods. This is a continuous process of monitoring, adjusting, and refining, ensuring that the flow of information remains under their control. It also involves anticipating potential threats and proactively taking steps to neutralize them before they can damage the carefully constructed illusion. This proactive approach requires a deep understanding of the political landscape and the ability to foresee potential challenges. The ultimate goal of the Machiavellian manipulator is to accumulate and maintain power. Darkness by omission is simply one tool in their arsenal. A subtle and effective way to control perceptions, manipulate decisions, and ultimately achieve their objectives. It is a strategy that relies on deception, manipulation, and a deep understanding of human psychology. It is a dark art, but one that is frequently employed in the corridors of power. Understanding this strategy is crucial not only for those who seek to wield power themselves, but also for those who wish to protect themselves from its insidious influence. Recognizing the signs of manipulation, questioning the narratives that are presented to us, and demanding transparency are essential steps in breaking free from the trap of darkness by omission. Throughout history, the manipulation of information has been a cornerstone of empire and warfare. Consider the Roman Empire, a civilization that rose to dominance through military might, strategic alliances, and a carefully cultivated public image. The Roman Senate, a body composed of powerful and ambitious individuals, understood the importance of controlling the narrative. While military victories and infrastructure projects were widely publicized, stories of internal strife, corruption, and the exploitation of conquered peoples were often suppressed or downplayed. The focus remained on the grandeur and stability of the empire, creating a perception of invincibility that served to discourage dissent and maintain control over vast territories. This carefully curated image allowed the Roman emperors to consolidate power, maintain order, and project an aura of legitimacy both at home and abroad. By selectively highlighting certain aspects of their rule and omitting others, they shaped public opinion and cemented their authority. The power of the empire was not solely built on military strength, it was also built on a foundation of carefully managed information. Similarly, in the context of warfare, the manipulation of information can be a decisive factor in determining the outcome of a conflict. Throughout history, military leaders have employed tactics of deception and disinformation to mislead the enemy, demoralize the opposition, and bolster the morale of their own troops. Omissions play a crucial role in this process. For example, during wartime, governments often withhold information about casualties, setbacks, and the true cost of the conflict. This serves to prevent public outcry, maintain support for the war effort, and protect sensitive information from falling into the hands of the enemy. The narrative that is presented to the public is carefully crafted to emphasize victories, downplay losses, and portray the enemy as a ruthless and inhuman force. This manipulation of information can be highly effective in galvanizing public opinion and sustaining a war effort, even in the face of adversity. However, it also carries the risk of eroding public trust and creating a climate of suspicion and cynicism. The Vietnam War provides a stark example of the consequences of darkness by omission in a modern conflict. As the war dragged on and casualties mounted, the American public began to question the official narrative that was being presented by the government. The Pentagon Papers, a secret study of the war, revealed that the government had systematically misled the public about the true nature and extent of the conflict. This revelation fueled widespread anti-war protests, eroded public trust in the government, and ultimately contributed to the withdrawal of American forces from Vietnam. The experience of the Vietnam War serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of manipulating information and the importance of transparency in a democratic society. The attempt to control the narrative ultimately backfired, leading to a loss of credibility and a deep sense of disillusionment. In the realm of international relations, darkness by omission can be used as a tool of diplomacy and statecraft. Governments may choose to withhold information about their own activities, intentions, or capabilities in order to gain a strategic advantage over their rivals. This can involve concealing intelligence operations, downplaying diplomatic setbacks, or exaggerating military strength. The goal is to create a perception that serves the interests of the state, whether it be to deter aggression, influence negotiations, or maintain a favorable balance of power. However, this strategy can also be risky, as it can lead to misunderstandings, miscalculations, and even unintended escalation of conflicts. The absence of accurate information can breed mistrust and suspicion, making it more difficult to resolve disputes peacefully and maintain stable relationships between nations. The historical examples of the Roman Empire and the Vietnam War illustrate the enduring power and potential consequences of darkness by omission. Whether it is used to consolidate power, prosecute a war, or conduct diplomacy, the manipulation of information remains a potent tool in the hands of those who seek to influence events and shape perceptions. Understanding the dynamics of this strategy is essential for navigating the complex and often treacherous landscape of politics, warfare, and international relations. Recognizing the signs of manipulation, questioning the narratives that are presented to us, and demanding transparency are crucial steps in protecting ourselves from the insidious influence of darkness by omission. The careful control of information is not simply a matter of strategy, it is a fundamental aspect of power itself. The practice of darkness by omission, when refined and methodically applied, becomes more than a tactic. It crystallizes into a comprehensive philosophy of power. It is a philosophy predicated on the understanding that what is not revealed holds just as much, if not more, influence than what is openly displayed. Think of a surgeon meticulously excising a tumor. They are not adding anything to the body, but their precise removal creates profound change, altering the course of life itself. Similarly, darkness by omission is about the precise and calculated removal of specific facts from the broader narrative, thus shaping the perception of reality itself. This requires a keen understanding of human psychology, particularly our inherent biases, vulnerabilities, and the predictable ways in which we fill in gaps in our knowledge. When information is withheld, the human mind instinctively seeks to complete the picture, often relying on pre-existing beliefs, assumptions, and emotional impulses. A skilled practitioner of darkness by omission anticipates these psychological tendencies, knowing that the concealed information will be replaced with assumptions that serve their agenda. This is not mere deception, it is the art of psychological manipulation on a grand scale. The application of this philosophy extends far beyond the battlefield